Bing bong. Welcome to the Baseball Insiders live on YouTube. The exact normal time we're always on, Wednesday at 4:19 p.m. We appreciate you joining us. Had to make some accommodations this week, move things around, but that's me. I'm Adam Weinrib. You see me probably. Alongside me, as always, is FanSided's MLB Insider Robert Murray, who's in Wisconsin this week. Was at Brewers-Pirates this week. We're going to talk about that. Going to get some insight on the moving relief market, the Angels as sellers, change of scenery candidates, whether someone who might have needed a change of scenery a month ago still needs one, plus a trade deadline blow for a pure seller, another pitching injury that's going to impact the market this July. But before we get in all of that, Robert Murray, thank you for joining me. How are you doing, man?
I'm great. Although I will say one thing that is bothering me is the number of spam calls and texts that I've been getting today. I don't know what that's about, but I will not let that impact my day. Today's been very good. We got a lot of stuff going on in baseball. We got suspensions dropping right before the podcast. We got stuff about the bullpen market and all sorts of different stuff. So we're going to have a loaded show today on a Wednesday afternoon, which a little bit different. Adam Weinrib, how are you?
I am good. Did I miss a suspension while I was vamping? What happened?
The Astros pitcher, who was it last night?
Got suspended. Ronell and his dirty glove. Yes.
Yep, that's it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I believe there was an umpire quote there. 10 games is a lot of games. Okay. There's an umpire quote there that Talking Baseball reached. It was Chandler Rome who had it. It was the stickiest stuff I felt on a glove since we've been doing this for a few years now, said Eric Backus. Now, what's weird about that quote is that's definitely not the first time I've heard an umpire say that. They seem to default to saying, like, this is the stickiest stuff I've ever felt. Oh, okay, wait, no, this is actually. Like, whenever they catch somebody, they love to say, like, not only was it sticky, it's the stickiest stuff of all time, which maybe it's a little scapegoat. It gives them a little more credence. Maybe fans will go like, oh, I guess, yeah, no, you can't be using the stickiest stuff ever. That can't be legal. But another blow to an Astros team that definitely does not need to thin out their pitching depth anymore. They're 17-25 right now, though. They're kind of crawling back into the picture as we all expected they would. The Rangers are letting them. The Rangers are on a losing streak. The Astros are in a, not an enviable position, but it's been worse. And you definitely don't want to lose your breakout starter right now for 10 days.
No, I mean, that's doomsday. All right, doomsday might be a little bit strong, but that's not ideal for the Astros at all. And as they were starting to creep back into things, they lose Garcia for 10 games, and it just places a little bit more pressure on that rotation, which already had quite a bit of questions there. That division is just really tricky overall. We got the Mariners that are leading it now, then you got the Rangers, then you still got the A's that are still lingering in that thing, and then, the Astros and then the Angels. We'll dive into the Angels here in the not-so-distant future, but that division is just very puzzling. Obviously, a lot is going to change once the Rangers get a lot of these players back who are on the IL, and you got to imagine the Astros are going to end up bouncing back, and especially since they really didn't fall that far back into this, or far back out of this, I should say.
Yeah.
So they're well within striking distance. We're about 30-ish% into the season, so a lot of season to be played, and the Astros are not dead. Let's just say that.
At the same time, it kind of does feel crazy to already be 30% of the way through the season, which is
just started.
Yeah, season just began in a snap. We're 30% in. Teams are becoming a little bit more defined, and your bets are becoming a bit clearer, maybe a little more data, be a little more confident in what you're seeing. If you'd like to translate that to DraftKings, they're offering a fantastic sign-up bonus for new users. New customers can place a $5 first bet on any sport to instantly claim $150 in bonus bets when you sign up with our code Baseball Insider. Now, one of our Discord members, one of our listeners the other day asked me for the code. I didn't respond fast enough, and they called me an idiot and said I was bad at my job. They were right.
True.
That code, it's Baseball Insider, and if you ask me later, I might just give it to you. You'll also receive one single game parlay reward every day. And the best part is that you will get both rewards, even if your first bet loses. And if you're like me, your first bet will lose. Using our code Baseball Insider not only gets you these bonuses, but it also directly supports our podcast. If you've been considering signing up for DraftKings, and I know you have, make sure to use the code Baseball Insider to maximize your first bets. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 plus, physically present, legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check that episode description for the full terms of the offer to see if you qualify. And join our Discord if you're not already in there to get first priority on questions, to be able to talk to us between streams. ask Robert Q's, ask me Q's, ask me for the Baseball Insiders DraftKings code, and I won't give it to you because I'm probably watching either the Knicks or Rangers, and I'm a little slow on the uptake. But if you bug me enough, I will drop it off. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for joining. Robert, you took advantage of your time spent in Wisconsin this week, and you took a trip to Miller Park, which is now American Family Field, but I'm still saying Miller Park first before I eventually get to the correct name, to check out Brewers Pirates. Now, I know we teased a couple updates on this last show, which was just Monday. What stood out to you from spending time in those locker rooms? What did you maybe pick up on?
Yeah, I would say the first few things that I noticed, first of all, Mitch Keller, what he ended up doing against that Brewers lineup was really impressive. You could tell from the get-go. He ended up making the first few hitters in the Brewers lineup in the first inning just look absolutely silly. And I told some people, I saw the game with my mom and dad, and I texted a buddy, and I was like, the Brewers are going to be in for a long night as long as Mitch Keller's in the game. And lo and behold, he ended up pitching, and he did not allow a single run. The Brewers got some runners on base for sure, but they did not get the key hit. Then Josh Fleming entered the game and allowed 5 runs, and then got designated for assignment the next day. So not a great outing for him. But Keller was the biggest contract for a pitcher that the Pirates have ever done. And he has really looked the part, and he's someone that the Pirates definitely plan on building around. And he's really been showcasing why, especially in this start. So that was really encouraging for him. I will say the thing that continues to stand out for me with the Brewers is that William Contreras and Christian Yelich look like stars, especially Contreras. You even heard Pat Murphy say after the game today, like what he's doing right now is epic. He's probably, at least statistically at this point, the best catcher in baseball this season. It's been awesome. He's been a huge addition for the Brewers, and knowing they only gave up Estuary Ruiz to get him in that 3-team deal with the A's and the Braves, that looks like a real coup for them. So shout out to Matt Arnold for that deal, which looks like one of his best. And Christian Yelich, he's been someone who obviously MVP discussion a few years ago. He was really, really, really good, and then he regressed, and he's been dealing with back injuries since, and he dealt with a back injury earlier this year. But he looks like a totally different player. He's hitting well over 300. I think he's in the 360 range, give or take. And he's been hitting the ball to the opposite field, which I remember when I was around the Brewers as a beat writer, whenever he was hitting the ball to the opposite field, that's when you know he was on. And he was consistently doing that despite getting deep into the count early in games. So what both of those guys have done, really, really impressive. And to close this thought out, this is a very hot topic in the Discord, especially today, but what's going on with Rowdy Tellez? I don't necessarily think his leash is that short. I could be wrong there, but the Pirates have insisted, at least in recent weeks, that they wanted to be patient with him despite his struggles. And to be fair, he's been really bad. There's seeing him up close, he looked nothing like the Rowdy Tellez of when he was doing really well with the Brewers a few years ago or a couple years ago. So they got to figure out exactly what to do there. But it's also getting to the point where they might have to do something about this because he's been that bad. Great locker room guy. He's someone that the Pirates really value for like locker room leadership, and we got to see it with how he stood up for David Bednar. But you can only put up with that kind of production enough, and it just hasn't been good enough, plain and simple.
Pirates fans will not be thrilled to hear that the leash is not that short, but May 15th, I mean, 30% of the season, but that means 70% still to go. They did not bring him in this offseason to cut him loose on May 15th. No. Maybe entertaining a reduction in reps, and they probably should be, depending on what their intentions are for this season. But I think the expectation has to be that he probably is going to stick around. And as for Contreras, we were talking before the show briefly about Alec Boehm, top 10 in F4, Anthony Volpe, top 10 in F4, guys you probably don't anticipate being on that list, along with these other genuine emergent superstars. 6th on the list, or should I say tied for 5th with Juan Soto and Gunnar Henderson, is William Contreras. So if you're not paying attention yet to the superstar things he's doing, if it takes a Pat Murphy post-game quote to cue you in, he's up amongst the game's great stars right now, hanging out. Anytime you can rub elbows with Juan Soto on a list like that, obviously Soto accrues most of that offensively. He's been passable defensively this year, but Contreras doing it on both sides of the ball.
Oh, 100% he has. And that's also a shout out to the Brewers' ability to develop catchers, because I know that was a real concern when they ended up acquiring him, is like a little bit of a defensive questions, but he's been awesome there. Charlie Green is it's Charlie Green and Walker McKinven who are really good with developing catchers in Milwaukee. So those guys deserve a lot of credit because they've done it with other catchers in the past, and Contreras is just the latest example of that.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the bullpen a little bit, because it does feel like the main area in which we're sort of able to speculate at this point. The one market that's moving a little bit, or at least every time a rumors column drops, it's the one focus. We'll talk a little bit at the end of the show about why the starting pitching market is more muddled than it should be. But bullpen market, everybody's trying to pick apart these sellers, try to find arms. Ryan Helsley has become a popular name for good reason. Mason Miller going to be the most expensive potential trophy, but you can't rule it out. We talked targets on the last show, ranging from the expected to the totally fanciful. Has anything clarified for you a little bit about potential options and hungry teams since we talked last on Monday?
Yeah, I'm still of the belief that Mason Miller is very, very, very unlikely to get traded, just because that asking price is going to be just through the roof. And so far, teams are seemingly just balking at that asking price. So we'll see if anyone's willing to match it, because you got to imagine it'll come down and be a little bit more realistic once the deadline gets here. But that being said, he's only 25 and controllable for a few years, so maybe it doesn't come down. Who knows? But I don't think he's going to go anywhere. I think Ryan Helsley is a real fascinating one, and he's 29, controllable through, I want to say, 2026, 2025? I think it's 2026. And he's been awesome for the Cardinals this year, and even in the last couple of years as well. I think he, with the way that the Cardinals are trending, could end up being a legit candidate to be moved. And a team that could really make sense there is the Baltimore Orioles, because Mason Miller might be too high for any team in terms of asking price. Helsley is going to be a good amount for sure, especially with him being controllable. But the Orioles can pay that. So I think they are a team that makes a whole lot of sense there with that glaring need in the ninth.
Yeah, the Cubbies fans want Mason Miller, but if anyone's going to pay up, it's going to be look. If you judge based on MLB Pipeline's new top 100 update, Cubs have 8 guys in that top 100. They're lapping the field in the way that the Orioles and Rays have and Dodgers have in years past. The Dodgers all of a sudden have 3 names on that list. Graduating helps. Bobby Miller no longer there. Andy Pages is one of the top 3. He's not going to be there much longer. No one is saying the Dodgers don't have a healthy farm, nor is anyone saying the Dodgers don't have a future. But the Cubs might have more chips to move at this point. So I wouldn't rule them out either, although Miller feels like a bridge too far. Maybe Helsley is a better target. And I know you wrote another potentially underrated bullpen option who we just talked about them at the top of the show. We don't know if they're sellers yet. The Rangers are opening the door, letting them back into the AL West race. But the Houston Astros have pieces to consider here.
They sure do. And I'm glad you mentioned this, because I would have forgotten it. Ryan Pressly, I think he is someone, if the Astros do sell, and I don't think that's on their minds right now. I think their minds are just on getting back into contention. So this is more speculative than anything for me, or from me, I should say. But Pressly would make a lot of sense. And he is someone who, if you look at Pressly, his ERA is above 5. And then you look at his FIP, it's right around 3. His strikeout to walk ratio is really good. His underlying numbers suggest that he's going to end up bouncing back in a big way. And I think if you look at him as an option for a team like the Orioles or a team like the Cubs or any of these other contending teams, I think it would make a lot of sense. And it wouldn't necessarily break the bank because he's in his mid-30s. He's not controllable long-term, but I think he could be a real solid option for some of these teams that are trying to really contend in 2024. And maybe they try to extend him after the year. Who knows? But he's proven he's dependable, and his numbers suggest he's going to get better. So I think he's someone to keep an eye on if the Astros do indeed continue to slide here.
Astros are so odd, but you could theoretically, if you wanted to, thin out that bullpen a little bit and do a hybrid compete. Now, the Astros have not had as deep a pitching core this year as they are used to having. So you might not be so willing to say, our demoted closer can go. We're going to replace him. We can burn and churn like the Rays, like the Yankees. The Astros might not be so, if they are hanging around the fringe of the race, might not be so willing to sacrifice any bullpen arms whatsoever. But if they do continue to fall off, that has to be a consideration, especially with Josh Hader locked up long term. And any team who has seen the Astros in the postseason the past 5 years knows how talented and dependable Presley is when the heat is on. So don't forget that either.
No, 100%. And I mean, with the way that he's been able to work when the heat is on, especially in the big moments in the postseason, I think that's something that these teams really got to consider. And there's some of these players that are really good in the regular season, but don't have that postseason experience. That's a bit of a gamble, especially if you're looking at a team like the Orioles. I keep mentioning the Orioles for bullpen help, especially in the ninth inning. I think that it makes so much sense, especially with Craig Kimbrell's struggles. So I think that's going to be the team we really hear the most buzz about in terms of the ninth inning market before the deadline here.
And who could have seen the Craig Kimbrell struggles coming? Surely no baseball viewers had any idea that was in it. What happened year over year? Like a totally different guy. That's all I have on that. Well, one team that should be a seller, and I don't think anyone in the comment section or anywhere else will dispute this, but for some reason has not gotten the attention that other obvious sellers like the White Sox and A's have, is the Angels out west, who talk about igniting a match last night. Ron Washington basically throwing Luis Guillorme under the bus and then running the bus back over him. Not that he was wrong. Not that he's supposed to say, hey, that's a super well executed squeeze bunt. Really proud of you. Good stuff. But just the manager, typically, more often than not, it's already a risky decision to call for the squeeze with such control issues. And he calls for it. And then when the pitch is way off the plate and the squeeze isn't laid down, says, yeah, it's a bad squeeze. It's not my fault. It's your fault. That's really not how it's done. And only apparently May 15th. So May 14th, we have an answer to how long it takes for the Los Angeles Angels to break a man. It's 44 days into the season. Not what he deserves. But this is a team that is a clear seller. And we had a comment earlier basically listing off, who's going to get sold: Drury, Matt Moore, Simber, Estevez. Angels fans showed up today ready to talk selling. And it's funny because I haven't seen that much of this chatter lately. Mark Feinstein of MLB.com laid it out in a column that ran today as well, that he included the Angels among these sellers, which a lot of people haven't done yet, and reminded us that Joe Adell has sort of been this change of scenery candidate forever, but actually is producing now. He's got an 809 OPS. Things have started to click. So I guess two-part question: Angels as sellers, who are you looking at? And second part, now that Adell has figured it out, does he have a future in Anaheim, or is that still a guy where they're like, we don't know what this is, and if maybe we sell him at his peak?
Yeah, it's good questions. And the first mention other Angels trade candidates, I think the guys that are listed right there are really good, as a really good start. Then others that I would mention: Tyler Anderson and then Luis Rengifo. I think both of those, they're controllable options, and especially teams needing starting pitching help. I think Tyler Anderson is not necessarily the worst option in the entire world. I believe he's under contract next year for $13 million, which isn't too bad. He's showing signs this year for sure. So, I mean, it's not like he's producing like he was last year, to say the least. But I think those two, in addition to the four listed there, are really good options. The Joe Adell question is a really fascinating one, because for the first 4 years of his career in Anaheim, he had the top prospect label all over him, but yet he looked like a total bust. We just got to call it like it is. He barely played. I believe he played 17 games last year and just looked like an obvious designated or DFA candidate. And the Angels ended up holding on to him, gave him one last chance, and they're being rewarded for it right now. He's got an 809 OPS. He's got 7 home runs this year, averaging only about 248 in that range. So, I mean, nothing too crazy, but he's showing signs of being better and working toward the player that they thought he could eventually become. And do you trade a guy like that now while he's got some sort of value? and risk another team really unleashing the rest of what's left in that tank, because that could make them look even worse than they already do? Or do you hold on to him and think that you can continue to get more out of him? And it's such a difficult question, and I don't know what the Angels are going to do. My guess is they probably keep him because they won't want him to end up breaking out elsewhere, and they'll probably think that they can continue to unleash him in Anaheim. But also, if you do trade him, you're still not going to get the overall value of what you would have once gotten. So I'm guessing they're probably going to end up keeping him. But who knows? There could be some team that views him as a solid number 3 outfielder, a number 4 outfielder, and trades for him. The Dodgers are always a team that I thought made sense for him because their player development is really, really good. I don't know if they're interested or not, but that fit to me, at least on paper, isn't necessarily the worst.
Early in this season, too, he was sort of in Ron Washington's doghouse. He was oversliding bases. He was making, weird errors at the margins, the kind of things that really aggravate a manager when you're trying to make that one last positive impression, not a first impression by any means, but trying to prove that you are a different guy than you were in previous seasons where you could barely crack the rotation and we're losing reps to Mickey Moniak and Taylor Ward. Finally, he's hitting his stride, and they do have to decide as we spiral out of control. Is this someone we dedicate to long-term? Is this someone whose hot streak we want to parlay into something rather than a straight DFA? Not to linger on the Ron Washington thing for too long, but how did you react when you heard that quote? Did you believe that was real? That sounded like one of those MLB facts accounts reactions to the banned bunt.
Yeah, I legitimately thought it was a fake Sam Blum account. Is what I thought when I saw the comments, and then all of a sudden I realized it was the real Sam, and I'm like, oh boy, and it was shocking. That's the thing about Ron Washington is he's old school. He will not hide how he feels. But in that moment, I thought maybe that was not the right move. And then when they went and talked to him, it was Guillorme, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like when they talked to him in the locker room after the game, he wasn't aware of Ron Washington's comments. So I'm sure after that interview was done and he saw the comments, those two probably had a good discussion. And I'm curious, I don't know if Ron Washington has talked about it today at all, but I'm very curious to see what exactly the fallout from that could be. And Artie Moreno has made a lot of questionable decisions in his time of owning the Angels. I think that is a very non-controversial thing to say. I did like the hire of Ron Washington. I think he's a good manager, but his comments there, not necessarily the greatest. But it's also at the end of the day, he's a great manager. I think he's a really, really good manager, but you can only do so much with the talent that you have in that roster, and there's just none. With Trout out, with Rendon on the IL once again, that roster is just not in a good spot. So I feel bad for him, but he wanted to be a manager. He took the Angels job, and now he's kind of paying the price for it.
Yeah, and clearly, struggling to deal with the various things that you have to balance in order to keep a team that is struggling to that degree afloat. We will obviously, hopefully, get another quote today. He probably will have to give a clarifying quote. I think if you said something like that at your job, you probably would have to follow it up the next day with an additional statement. Yeah, I feel like that's a given, but we'll see. Moving on to Oakland and the starting pitching market as a whole, I would say a lot of the focus is on Mason Miller for good reason. It's the best closer in baseball at this point in time. But another trade deadline blow for the A's, and this follows in a grand tradition, the 2024 tradition of losing starting pitchers. Paul Blackburn's injury, man, he's been pitching through apparently a metatarsal injury all year, and it finally became too much for him. It's not tough to figure out the inflection point where the foot started bothering him. The ERA in his last 4 starts has risen from 1 to 4. You could tell that something was wrong, and he ended up basically, Mark Kotsay said he's going to be in a boot for a while. Doesn't sound necessarily like it's going to knock him out through the deadline, but it's very reminiscent of when the A's were trying to sell Frankie Montas. And he had a shoulder issue, and everybody said, oh, he might not be healthy by the deadline. And then he came back, and they said, don't worry about it. It's resolved. He goes to the Yankees, and 2 weeks later, it becomes clear he's had a cement mixer this entire time. So Blackburn, no longer a sure thing. Jesus Luzardo, too. Early injury, poor play, ERA near 6 for a Marlins team that's floundering and already selling Luis Arraez. That makes 2 major deadline arms who don't appear to be on the market at their peaks right now. This is a tough starting pitching market, and maybe that's why we're so focused on the relief stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And the starting pitching market is a really unique spot right now. The Jesus Luzardo thing kind of threw a huge wrench in things. Although, I mean, I don't think his injury status is going to end up impacting his deadline outlook at all.
Yeah.
Because when I initially heard about his injury, I thought that was a huge concern, but it's nothing there. But as far as Paul Blackburn goes, this has been lingering for him since spring training, and it really got aggravated in his last appearance. And he went on the IL. He's going to be in a boot for a couple weeks. He's going to be reevaluated, and they're going to go from there and try to figure out what the plan is. So it's kind of a wait and see mode. But he was easily one of the more desirable guys that was going to end up being on the trade market. And there was no guarantees he was going to be moved, but with the lack of clear-cut high-end options, he definitely stood out with him and Luzardo. And the A's better hope he's back well before the deadline, so these teams don't have the lingering concerns that they did with Montas, despite the Yankees end up acquiring him. And obviously that turned out to be a disaster.
For an expensive package too. Like, how are the injury concerns? Is he okay? Well, we're not 100% sure. No worries. Still going to pay the price. Thank you for are you sure you don't want to learn more information? No, we're good. Yeah.
And then, yeah, not great. But another thing too is like the starting pitching market, as far as the trade deadline goes, is really unsettled because obviously questions about Luzardo and Paul Blackburn, but you also don't know what teams like the Astros and the Cardinals are going to do. And those are just a few of these teams that are on the bubble right now. So a lot of questions, very few answers, but we will get that clarity probably within the next 4 to 6-ish weeks, give or take, maybe somewhere around that ballpark. But with the way the season's moving so quickly, we're 30% into the season already. The deadline's going to get here just like that.
And that's why you join us on a podcast like the Baseball Insiders, because the deadline is creeping. If you would have told me a week ago that it would, once we reached 30% of the season completed next week, that it would feel both like no time had passed and a ton of time had passed. That's where I'm at right now. I'm like, man, we just started. I've also watched 45 some odd games. So many trends are already blurring together. Anthony Volpe, like we said, has already been hitting 380, been hitting a powerless 250, and now all the way up to around 270, and he's top 10 in the league in F4. Like we've already seen so many changes. Things are starting to stabilize a bit, and it is time for some of these sellers to choose a direction. Now, a team like Houston, they're never going to pick until further down the line, but a team like the Cardinals, a team like the Angels, it's time. Come to us, join the market. There's plenty of room for all of you.
Oh, there absolutely is. And Lord knows if they both do sell, Cardinals and Angels are gonna have a lot of teams barking up their rosters. Cause there's talent, especially the Cardinals. They got pieces. Angels, not so much. They're probably not going to get a whole lot in return for the guys that they have, both controllable and on rental contracts. But those are two teams to really watch. The Astros are another, but as you said, they're not going to make a decision until they really have to. And we're not even remotely close to that point quite yet.
Speaking of, one last question that pops to mind is we're talking about these borderline sellers. The Astros are not going to make a decision forever. We have spoken at length about the Blue Jays the past couple shows. We know they're not going to make a decision yet either. No. But just before this show went live, they carry a late lead 2-1 into the bottom of the ninth in Baltimore. Jordan Romano comes in, grounder up the middle, clanks off Isaiah Kiner-Falefa's body. Next batter is Adley Rutschman, walk-off 2-run home run. That has led to some John Schneider hot seat talk intensifying today. We can't do the horse race game. We can't just do he lost one game in Baltimore, he's got to go. But while a trade deadline decision might be further down the line, Schneider to the hot seat feels much more pressing at this point in time. For all the hot seat stuff we have to deal with, in the Discord, in the discourse in general, I would not be shocked at all if the Blue Jays are moving closer to making a change there, even before they decide to sell, because of how quickly they moved off Montoyo just a couple years ago for Schneider.
Oh, absolutely. And with the way that they're trending, because they're 19 and 23 right now, and they're in last place in that division. They look, his seat should be hot.
A deserved last place, by the way.
Absolutely.
Playing like a last place team.
Oh, 100%. And he should be on the hot seat, but also I think some of the pressure should really be pointed at the front office here. They tried for the big names. Obviously, they tried for Ohtani. They were interested in Juan Soto, but they did not do much to upgrade that roster at all. And even toward the deeper part of the offseason, and the stars continued to linger on the market, they did not do anything. They just stood pat, and their big offseason moves were signing Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and they made some other marginal moves on the roster. It was unacceptable at the time, and you could tell they needed to add more to that roster because it screamed it, and yet they didn't do it. So for as much heat as like Schneider is getting, the front office should be getting even more heat. And yeah, they have a really talented roster, but it's flawed. They needed another star. They didn't do it, and they're paying the price for it. And there's probably going to be people that are on the hot seat, and they might even lose their jobs because of it. And like the two teams that really scream change, Blue Jays and the Cardinals. I think those are the teams that really stand out at the moment.
The only difference is that Cardinals, we can tell maybe exactly who might be moving in there when those certain players, when those certain big name players lose their roles at the top of the front office. Blue Jays, much more uncertainty. And it does sort of feel now in retrospect, like a bunch of people were like, all right, we know we might be close to the end of our ropes here. Ohtani or Soto, or we're in real trouble. Like, we got to swing for the absolute fences. We got to connect. And if we don't, we're going to be answering some tough questions come May 15th. And they were right. They're getting tough questions from the baseball insiders. So,
damn straight they are.
Yeah. Here, you feet to the fire. Come on the show, John Schneider. Call me fat boy. I dare you. Thank you. Thank you again to Robert Murray for helping talk through this. As you said, the deadline is coming sooner than most of us feel. Thanks everyone for joining us. Wednesday special time, no show tomorrow. And we're taking next week off, right? We will not be on the air next week. Apologies, but we will see you again at the end of May. We'll also see our Discord All-Stars. We got to schedule another private Zoom for the end of the month once we are back in business. So we will be in touch on that. And as the deadline approaches, remember, we're going to increase that frequency a little bit to probably in the month of July, because June's a bad month for me. I'm in Viva Italia in June.
Wow.
So
I'm in 2 weddings in June too. So that's, I'm best man in one and I'm a groomsman in the other. So it's going to be a busy month for your boy.
Yeah. Work on get your speech, get the Google Doc going now. Just start adding random memories, because that's the best way to roll. I had obviously my vows are not a best man speech, but way early, I was just kind of like popping stuff in the vows, being like, I don't work on this ahead of the deadline. I'm going to get some stuff in here.
That's good work by you. Good advice.
People were satisfied. People said good vows. So that's how it's done. Well, thank you for obviously everybody joining us. Good show. Had fun. Got the rumor mill stoked a little bit. We will be off next week. We'll see you again Monday, Thursday, 3:30, normal time, coming back from that brief break. If you want to see us in between, join the Discord. If you got questions for us, we'd be more than happy to answer. In the meantime, until then, signing off. Robert, thanks so much, dude.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate you. We'll see everyone not next week, but the week after that. And let's do that. Let's go Birds, baby. There we go.
I will let you say it. Let's go Knicks. Come on, guys. Electric last night. Let's just get one more. I had to pollute this podcast with a little bit of New York chatter. But until next time, we will see everybody on the flip side of the week off. Take care.
That we will.